Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our last lesson of This Can Happen, a credible case for feeling good about the future, lesson number 6, and then. So, This Can Happen is dedicated by Arlene in loving memory of her children, Jody Sue Dumbeck of blessed memory, and Michael Scott Dumbeck of blessed memory. May the learning that we do together be a comfort for their neshamas and an elevation for their souls.
Ears are very good.
So last week, we talked about what the rules and the regulations are for identifying who Mashiach is. And we discussed that Mashiach is absolutely a person born from a human father and a human mother. The person is going to be a great leader amongst the Jewish people. The person is going to be an absolute Torah scholar with righteousness, with saintliness. He's going to inspire the Jewish people back towards a life of Torah and mitzvot. He's going to wage the battles for God, the culture war, the spiritual battle, and if need be, even a physical battle. He will become king of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, like reestablish the monarchy, build the third Beis HaMikdash, and then gather all the Jews who have been dispersed throughout the world back into the land of Israel. Then you know for sure this is Mashiach, and you have entered the Messianic era. The questions for today: what will life be like in the Messianic era? In what ways will things change? And in what ways will they stay the same? Now, Yogi Berra, right, very famous scholar and athlete, he was known to say, it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. So when we talk about what Mashiach is going to be like in the future, are we making predictions or do we have sources to back this stuff on? What do the prophets say? So we're going to begin with text number 1a. I actually don't even have my book in front of me. Hold on a second as I get my book. Here we go. We're going to begin with text number 1a on page 247. Mitchell, would you like to start us off?
Sameness. Do not presume that in the Messianic age, any facet of the world's nature will change or that there will be innovations in the work of creation. The world will continue according to its pattern.
So what the Rambam did in this text, he looked through all of what Jewish literature, all of the Torah, all the prophets, all the Talmud, what they had to say about the Messianic era, and he came to what he believes is a halachic conclusion. And what did he say in this text? He essentially said that, I don't know why this keeps happening, but he says nature will continue. He says in the Messianic era, don't think that it's going to be a miraculous time of food growing on trees. That's not what's going to be happening. The world is going to continue according to the rules of nature. However, if you look at some of the sources within the Tanakh, a very different picture is painted. Let's go to text number 1b. Vivian, please. Text number 1b on page 248.
Difference. The wolf will dwell with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the young goat. The calf and the yearling will be with the lion, and a little child will lead them all.
How does this sound to you? Does this sound like the rules of nature? Or does this sound a bit miraculous? I can tell you that on Monday, Memorial Day, I went with my family to Shalom Wildlife Center. And there were tigers that were there. There were wolves that were there. And there were sheep, lamb. They were in separate locations. Not only were they in separate locations, but there was quite large fences that separated between them. Because according to the rules of nature, the wolf does not lay down with the lamb. The wolf does not hang out with the lamb. Children do not play with lions or tigers. Quite dangerous, quite violent. Yet what does the prophet Isaiah say? That when Mashiach comes, this is going to happen. So we see here is conflicting messages. We have the approach of the Rambam that nature will continue. A lion is a lion. And then we have the approach of Isaiah that the lion, the lamb, they'll all hang out together with each other and it's all going to be great. How do we reconcile this contradiction? Irv, would you like to read text number 1C?
Metaphoric meaning. The wolf will dwell with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the young goat. These words are an allegory and a parable. The interpretation of the prophecy is that the Jews will dwell at peace together with those wicked Gentiles who had sought to devour them like a wolf and a leopard. They will no longer steal or destroy, but live at peace with Israel. Similarly, other messianic prophecies of this kind are allegories. Only in the messianic era will we understand their true meaning.
So the Rambam says there's no need to take these prophecies about various miracles in a literal fashion. The Torah is often written in poetic language. It paints a beautiful picture, but we're not meant to take it literally. It's referring to the fact that when Mashiach comes, finally there will be an end to anti-Semitism, right? There will be peace on earth, right? The Jews will be able to live without worry of violence, without worry of terrorism, without worry of war around the corner, right? There will be peace for the Jewish people.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say that, and as Rambam concludes, any of these more miraculous prophecies that is hard for us to pin down, when Mashiach comes, we'll find what they really mean. But to make pronouncements about the nature of the world changing, he's not ready to go so far. Yes, all right, Vivian, what's your
You
question?
might have answered this a week or two ago. I got a phone call, so I don't know if I caught whether you answered it. So,
Okay.
so I understand that here we're dealing with, words and texts that, we know are miraculous because we don't see these things happening in our, now. We know that they're not, they're not the laws of nature right now. Does that mean that everything else we know about Mashiach, that there aren't any metaphoric elements of that either? Like, I think Debbie asked about, the fact that the person has to be a king, and you might have answered that, but is any part of that possibly metaphorical or no?
So in the laws of Mashiach, the Rambam writes what he believes is literal
Right.
and what he believes is metaphor. And we're
Gotcha.
going to talk about a lot of those things tonight. But
Okay.
what we can see so far, Mashiach being a king is literal. And when I say literal, that does not mean day one, because there's a person today who could be Mashiach, but there is no king at the moment. But what that means is, at the end of the day, when it comes time to officially be Mashiach, there will be a stage where there's a coronation and the person's actually the king.
Okay.
When it comes to a lion or a wolf, lying with a lamb and children playing with a lion, which means the entire nature of these animals is changed and altered, the Rambam is not willing to say that this is literal, right? Says this is allegorical. What does it mean? It means it is going to be the end of anti-Semitism. What does the allegory mean in more detail? When Mashiach comes, we'll figure out what is more literal, what's less literal. But from the standpoint that Rambam's comfortable of saying, he says it's going to be an end of anti-Semitism. And as we see in text number 3, this is a big part of what he believes the Messianic era is going to be about. Now, Brad or Marilyn, do you have the book this week for text number 3?
Yes, we do.
All
We're
right,
all set. Maryland is all set. Well prepared.
Excellent. Text number 3.
Text number 3. 3? Okay. Mashiach's doing. Okay, the
Wow.
Mashiach.
Oh, sorry, text number 2. Didn't mean to skip text number 2.
Oh, okay. Text number 2. End of okay.
Went along.
Subjugation. Okay, our sages taught there will be no difference between the current age and the Messianic era, except the emancipation from our subjugation to the Gentile governments.
So again, here we have the Rambam. He's quoting the Talmud, that don't expect that the Messianic era is going to be some type of, miraculous era and a miraculous time. What's going to be? There's an end of anti-Semitism. There's going to be real and true Jewish independence. We will not have to rely on the United States for $3 billion a year. We will not have to consider what the UN has to say. You won't have to consider what the New York Times has to say. Now, it's beautiful and it's a miracle that we have the state of Israel today and we have an army that we can defend ourselves. Yet we're battling not just the Palestinians, but we're battling the New York Times, right? We're battling so many other people. Israel cannot do what it needs to do. It cannot, or at least it will not, due to the fact that there are other influences in the world. When Mashiach comes, there'll be real and true Jewish independence. We will not have to rely on any other nation for anything. We'll be able to be the Jewish people to the fullest possible extent, to the fullest possible degree, without any hindrance, without any interference at all. So these are some of the major steps that the Rambam writes. Renew the Davidic dynasty. Now, I know today there was an election in Israel and Isaac Herzog, I believe his name was Isaac Herzog, was elected as the president of the state of Israel. Now, my understanding is that the president is not a very political position. You're more a international representative of the state of Israel. But when Mashiach comes, there's actually going to be a monarch, a king, Mashiach, right? That is going to be renewed and restored. Now, there are reasons why Judaism favors the idea of a monarchy, but that's not the topic for tonight's class. But it's interesting to think about how does that look and how does that work in a world where we live today, where democracy is the most popular. So then Mashiach is going to build the temple. Then he's going to gather the dispersed of Israel. And then he's going to restore all 613 mitzvahs. Now, just to get a little bit of a feel for the temple, I have a brief video that goes over a description of what the temple looked like and what went on inside the temple. Enjoy.
God told the Jews at Sinai to build a temple so that his presence could dwell among them, a place to worship, to gather as a nation, to receive atonement, inspiration, and instruction. Half a millennia later, God's desired location for a permanent home was revealed to King David in the ancient city of Jerusalem, atop a hillside known for Abrahamic times as Mount Moriah. David's son, King Solomon, completed a magnificent structure that attracted the title Beit HaMikdash and Beit HaBchira. It was fashioned with much gold, expensive woods, and precious materials. When it was completed in 827 BCE, the nation gathered to witness God's presence fill the temple. The mountain gained a new name, Har Habayit. At its summit, a stone building rose to enormous height. Within its gaping entrance was the Ulam, a lobby, beyond which was the Kodesh, furnished with 3 golden items, an altar for incense, a 7-branched menorah, and a table with racks for the showbread. At the sanctuary's far end, a separated area enclosed the temple's core, its most sacred location, the Kodesh HaKodashim, that held the Oron, the Ark of God, containing the tablets that Moses delivered at Sinai. The Ark of God rested upon a naturally protruding plateau, known as the Foundation Rock. Immediately outside the building, the courtyard of the Kohanim, priests, held a massive stone sacrificial altar with a lengthy access ramp. Nearby was the Kior, a cistern for rinsing hands and feet, and a platform for the Levites to chant psalms and play instruments. Further back, a larger area was designed for public assembly, known as the Woman's Courtyard. It included an extensive wooden balcony for women. The nation would gather 3 times each year to celebrate the festivals of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. The compound was surrounded by a massive wall and contained a series of steps, numerous gateways and guard posts. The temple's layout was exceptionally efficient, with compartments and chambers for every possible need, such as storage areas for wood, oil, and other materials, production and preparation areas, rooms for clothing, for weaponry in case of attack, ritual immersion pools, sleeping and eating areas, tool and instrument reserves, lockers for the priests, a charity room, a hall for Torah study, a chamber for the Sanhedrin, a lounge for temple officials, a repair workshop, animal holdings, ticket stations, and so on. There were separate entrances for distinct purposes, an oversight system, and honor guards. A small stream ran beneath the temple, which was used to maintain cleanliness. The temple stood for 4 centuries. It was destroyed by the Babylonian army in 423 BCE, rebuilt in 349 BCE, and stood for 4 centuries more until it was destroyed by the Romans in 69 of the Common Era. Through his prophets, God promised the Jews a third and eternal temple in the Messianic era, from which his presence will spread to the world, embracing all of humanity.
Now, if you want to learn more about the nature of the structure of the Beis HaMikdash, I taught a 3-part series on the structure of the Beis HaMikdash. It's on a website called TorahCafe.com. So if you go to TorahCafe.com, you type in my name, and there are 3 lectures that we go in great detail, the Temple Mount, and through every section, every gate, every wall, every room that's in the temple. One of the things that you'll notice is that we make a huge deal about the Western Wall today. The reason we make a huge deal about the Western Wall is because that was the one that was opposite the Holy of Holies. So it's the holiest section. However, parts of all 4 walls remain today. You literally have part of the north, the south, the east, and the western walls, including the very steps that were used as the main entrance to get into the Beis HaMikdash. It's all there. The gates, it's all there. So please check out those videos on TorahCafe.com for more information. So when Mashiach comes, right, the first thing that Mashiach is going to do, right, as the monarch, as the leader in the land of Israel, is to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Now, I don't know if you are aware, but currently, at this moment in time, there are other buildings on the Temple Mount. And the people who go to those buildings are not a very big fan of Jews coming onto that building. Right? You may be aware of recent events, what takes place when Jews go into the land, when Jews start going to the Temple Mount. So what is going to happen? What's going to happen? Is there going to be violence, right? Is there going to be some type of war breaking out? Absolutely not, right? What does Jewish tradition tell us? Jewish tradition tells us that the nations of the world are going to recognize that the greatest benefit that they could possibly have is to allow for the Beis HaMikdash to be built, because that is the home of God. It is the conduit for divine blessing in this world. It is the location from where all of God's blessings spread out and ultimately benefit them. So imagine a scenario where a person is very opposed to the internet. Don't like the internet. Don't want the internet. That's not for me. Don't want to have anything to do with it. But then the person learns how beneficial the internet is, how amazing the internet is. You could have a live video chat on Zoom with people in Australia, in Italy, in South Africa, and in South America at the same time instantaneously. It'll blow them away. You could do your taxes for free online, right? There's a million things that you could do on the internet that blows you away. And all of a sudden, over time, as you see how your life can be benefited so much by Amazon, a person will warm up and embrace the internet. In a similar fashion, due to the holiness, the righteousness, the charisma, and the talent of King Mashiach, and the message that he shares into the world, And as the world improves and develops, those people who are currently occupying the Temple Mount, they themselves will remove the buildings that are there. They themselves will rejoice and celebrate in the fact that the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple, is going to be built, and God will once again have a home on this earth. And then that is going to be the channel with which they're going to receive incredible blessings. Let's go to text number 5. Debbie, please. Page 254.
Okay. House for all nations. The word that Isaiah, son of Amoz, prophesied concerning Judah and Jerusalem. It shall be at the end of the days that the mountain of God's home shall be firmly established at the top of the mountains. It shall be raised above the hills, and all the nations shall stream to it. Many peoples shall go, and they shall say, come, let us go up to God's mountain, to the house of the God of Jacob, and let him teach us his ways, and we will go in his paths.
So the prophet Isaiah describes the Beis Hamikdash not only as a location that Jews will flock to, but all the nations of the world will flock to. They will want to experience God. They will want to be taught Torah ideas. They will want to learn ethics, morals, principles of meaningful and purposeful living from the Torah at the site of the temple. So the temple is something which will not only affect and impact the Jewish people, but it's going to have a transformative impact on the rest of the world, that it literally is the spiritual hub. That physical location is the spiritual hub for God, for Torah, for mitzvahs, for the entire world. So the Temple Mount is going to be important for all the nations of the world, and it is going to be recognized as the source of blessings for all the people of the world as well. But of course, it's going to have a unique draw, a unique pull, a unique attraction to the Jewish people. And this is why the Jewish people are going to flock back to the land of Israel. It is the magnet, so to speak, that's embedded at the heart of the Holy Temple that is going to gather in all the exiles as the Jews flock back to the land of Israel. Now, we're taught that when the Jewish people return back to the land of Israel, there's going to be an appearance of the 10 lost tribes. Now, what do I mean by that? King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, the one who built the first temple, he reigned over an era of peace and tranquility. The Jews were prosperous financially. They were prosperous spiritually. Shlomo HaMelech had a tremendous amount of wives. Why did he have so many wives? Because nations all over the world wanted to marry into the kingdom of Israel. They wanted to marry into the Jewish nation. How did they do it back then? They didn't just sign treaties, they got married. So Shlomo HaMelech politically was interconnected and woven with the rest of the world. There was peace and prosperity. Spiritually speaking, right, the Jewish people were at their fullest glory with the building of the first temple. Unfortunately, it only lasted one generation. After Shlomo HaMelech passed away, there was a fight for the crown. There was a fight for the throne. There was almost a civil war as the nation of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, divided into two separate kingdoms. The northern kingdom was called the Kingdom of Israel, and that had 10 tribes. The southern kingdom was called the Kingdom of Judah, and that had the city of Jerusalem and the Holy Temple, and that was led by the tribe of Yehuda, and a king from the tribe of Yehuda, as well as the tribe of Binyamin, and the tribe of Levi. So we had this split amongst the Jewish people. Generally speaking, the southern kingdom was more loyal to Torah and mitzvahs than the northern kingdom, but there were ups and there were downs along the way, and the prophet spoke to the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. There was all kind of excitement throughout Tanakh. 125 years before the first temple was destroyed, the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, was conquered by the Assyrians. And the Assyrians took the 10 tribes evacuated them, expelled them from the land of Israel, and repopulated them to places all around the world. Those 10 tribes ultimately became assimilated amongst the Gentile nations, and that for all intents and purposes have been lost to the Jewish people. And they're known as the 10 lost tribes. So there's a discussion that when Mashiach comes, these 10 lost tribes will return to the Jewish people. So what does this mean exactly, that they're going to return? So there's a few different approaches. One is, we are told that the prophet Jeremiah, the prophet Yirmiyahu, shortly before the destruction of the first temple, went out into the diaspora and brought back some of those 10 lost tribes. However, at that point in time, they did not know which tribe they belonged to. So when Mashiach comes, we will once again regain our tribal identity, our tribal affiliation. So even those Jews who were lost to the Jewish people, in other words, odds are we're either from the tribe of Yehuda or Binyamin. I'm from the tribe of Levi. However, when Mashiach comes, you will get your tribal affiliation, and it's very possible you may be descended from one of those 10 lost tribes. Another interpretation is that Judaism is passed down by the mother, which means that on a factual level, there are Jews out there who for 200 generations, perhaps, have been assimilated into the non-Jewish world and have been living as Gentiles for literally 2,000-3,000 years and have no idea that they're actually 100% Jewish. And when Mashiach comes, those people who had been lost will once again return back to the Jewish people together with their tribal affiliation as well. So the Jewish people will be drawn by the holiness of the temple, not just the general Jewish people, but the lost tribes that were exiled to an unknown location and assimilated amongst the nations, right? They will return as well. And I discussed two different possibilities of how that's going to happen. So Mashiach is going to build the Beis Hamikdash, is going to build the temple, and the Jews are going to start returning back to the land of Israel, and all 613 mitzvahs are going to be returned. Now, what does that mean? Of the 613 mitzvahs, there are 365 that are called negative commandments. These are prohibitions that are relevant and are obligatory at all times and in all places. Now, not every one of these 365 prohibitions are possible for us to get involved with, right? They have very specific and unique circumstances, but they certainly apply today. There's 248 positive mitzvahs. That means there are 248 actions that God commands and demands and desires for us to be able to perform for him. Can you guess how many of the 248 mitzvahs of the Torah are we able to perform today?
88.
What is that, Mitchell?
88.
Close, 87, right? Of the 248 mitzvahs that God asked us to perform, there are only 87 that are even possible for us to be performed today. When Mashiach comes, all 613 mitzvahs are going to be available. All 248 of those positive mitzvahs, our life is going to be so much more enriched by these incredible opportunities to connect to God in the most deep and intimate way in so many more facets and aspects of our life. Another important factor when Mashiach comes is that the Sanhedrin is going to be returned. Okay? Who and what is the Sanhedrin? In the biblical era and in the temple era, there was a supreme court of the Jewish people. It was called the Sanhedrin. It consisted of 71 judges. They served in the temple itself. When the temple was destroyed and they were on the run, ultimately it went to Tiberia, to the city of Tiberias. In order to be on this court, very difficult, very challenging. Besides all the knowledge and the piety that you had, you had to have a special form of rabbinic ordination, which is known as smicha. Now, you might be familiar with this word because when a rabbi becomes ordained today, we call it smicha, but it's not the real thing. The real thing, the real original smicha means you were ordained person to person, going back directly to Moshe himself. In order to be on the Sanhedrin, you have to have direct rabbinic ordination going back to Moshe himself. Because of the importance of this, there were unfortunately wicked Jewish kings who sought out to kill and to murder every and any rabbi who had this unique ordination and made it illegal on pain of death to give anyone else this type of ordination. So Jews literally sacrificed their lives to be able to maintain the system. But after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it continued for a short amount of time and then no longer was able to function. Why is the Sanhedrin so important? Not only can they resolve any disputes that exist within Jewish tradition and with Jewish law, they have the power and the authority to make a ruling that is binding on every single Jew, no matter where they live on earth. Today, there is no rabbinic court that can do that. If the chief rabbi of Israel makes a statement, it's important and it's meaningful, but his ruling has no bearing on my life. We have rabbis scattered throughout the world, each who represent and are the authority in their own specific community. No one can impose their will or ideas on any other. However, when it comes to the Sanhedrin has the ability to make law that is binding on the totality of the Jewish people. So when Mashiach comes, they will return, and perhaps they will be able to restore a certain degree of unity to the Jewish people. Now, certainly Ashkenazic and Sephardic customs will remain. Nevertheless, the Sanhedrin will have the ability to create or to enforce or to establish certain common traditions, common practices that will apply to and unite all of the Jewish people together. One of the important factors when Mashiach comes and the Sanhedrin is going to be returned is the calendar. The biblical command for the Jewish calendar is there must be two witnesses who actually see the new moon appear in the sky. They go to the rabbinic court, they testify, and the new month is established. That basically meant everyone was sitting on pins and needles. When is the new month going to be? Is the month 29 days? Or is the month 30 days? When is Rosh Hashanah going to be? When is Yom Kippur going to be? When's Sukkot going to be? When is Pesach going to be? Is there going to be a leap year? It's not going to be a leap year. There was no printed calendar for you to check up. You actually had to have witnesses. When the Sanhedrin no longer was able to function, they ratified a calendar up until Mashiach comes. But once Mashiach comes, once again, the calendar will return to the biblically ordained practice with two witnesses certifying the new moon every single month. Now, one of the more famous and well-known prophecies regarding the Messianic era, perhaps more famous amongst other religions, has to do with a war which some people refer to as Armageddon. Others refer to it as the apocalypse. And it absolutely does have some sources in Jewish tradition. What is it called? It's called the War of Gog uMagog. That's where the word Armageddon comes from, Gog uMagog. So it is predicted that a great war will take place in the land of Israel prior to Mashiach's coming. The War of Gog uMagog. Now, what's that all about? Now, those who were involved in the Jewish community might be aware that when Iran and Iraq were fighting with each other, many called that maybe this is Gog uMagog. When Iraq and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia were fighting with each other, some people speculated, could this be Gog uMagog? What is it? Is there going to be a devastating war that is going to take place in and around the land of Israel? What effect will it have on the Middle East? What effect will it have on the Jewish people? Let's go to text number 9. Is Nathan still here? All right, Nathan, text number 9, please.
The unknown, this is from Maimonides' Mishnah Torah. A straightforward interpretation of the prophet's words appear to imply that the war of Gog and Magog will occur at the beginning of the Messianic age. Before this war, a prophet will arise to inspire Israel to be upright and to prepare their hearts, as it is stated in Malachi, "Behold, I am sending you Elijah." Some sages stated that Elijah's coming will precede the coming of Mashiach. All these and similar matters cannot be definitely known until they occur, for these matters are not clarified in the prophet's words.
So the Rambam writes that when it comes to the battle of Gog and Magog, the details are unknown, the details are not clear in the prophets, therefore he does not make any pronouncements, any proclamations about it. He says, yeah, it's a thing, right? There are some sources about it, but who knows how it will lay out? It's one of those things that we're going to have to wait and see. Now, why is it that there is so little information? Why is there so little information? A war of Gog and Magog that's going to be around the land of Israel, I would like to know some information about that. I would like to be prepared for that. Why do we have such little information? From here, we go to a phenomenal cryptic text in the Talmud, text number 10. Phil, are you able to read, please, text number 10 on page 260?
Okay. Rabbi Yochanan taught in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, suffering a wayward child at home is more difficult than the war of Gog and Magog. For it is stated, a Psalm of David when he fled from his son Absalom, and the next verse reads, God, how numerous are my enemies, may many have risen against me. By contrast, regarding the war of Gog and Magog, it is stated, why are the nations in an uproar? Why do the people speak emptiness? It does not state how numerous are my enemies.
So it's a bit cryptic, like when you read it, you don't really see the connection between statement and statement and statement. He begins quoting Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that a person can have problems in life. There are different types of problems. You could have a global problem, the war of Gog and Magog, and you could have the problem of a rebellious child. Which one is worse? Now, you might think a global war that can result in thousands of deaths, if not hundreds of thousands of deaths. I mean, we've had wars that have had millions of deaths that can shape the future. That's major stuff. Rebellious child, who doesn't have a rebellious child, right? Who doesn't have a teenager that drove their parents up the wall? Yet, what does Rabbi Ben Shimon Bar Yochai says? Who do you have to worry about? Your kids. That's a much bigger problem. That's a much bigger concern. The war of Gog and Magog, not such a big issue. Where does he get this from? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai quotes chapter 2 of Tehillim and quotes chapter 3 of Tehillim. And he says one follows the other. This is divine providence, and they are connected. They don't just happen to be next to each other. There's a lesson that we can learn from it. What does it say in chapter number 2? Chapter number 2 makes reference to the war of Gog and Magog. And what does it conclude? It concludes that the war of Gog and Magog is called a nothing burger, right? Are you familiar with this expression? It's a nothing burger. A lot of talk, a lot of noise. But at the end of the day, there's nothing to be worried about, right? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, don't worry about it. This is why the Rambam doesn't really write about it. It says, don't worry about the war of Gog and Magog. What should you worry about? Psalm number 3. What is discussed in Psalm number 3? The rebellious son Avshalom of King David. King David had a son, Avshalom. He sought to overthrow him. He tried to make a civil war. Why did it happen? We are told in the Tanakh that King David, as righteous as he was, he failed to give his children a proper Jewish education. He was busy fighting wars. He was busy running the country, and he was busy teaching Torah. It's just when it came to his own children, he was limited and he didn't give them the education that they deserved. So Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says, what should you be worried about? Don't be worried about Armageddons and apocalypses and Gog and Magog. That's a nothing burger. What should you be worried about? What should you be concerned about? Focus our energy on the education of our children. Make sure your children have a Jewish education. That's earth-shattering. That's messianic. That's going to change the world. Don't worry about wars of Gog and Magog. That's not a thing. Worry about making sure that our kids have the right education. That's what we're talking about. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says this is the connection between Psalm number 2 and Psalm number 3. So thus far, we talked about the Messianic era not being that miraculous. But we do know that there's going to be some major changes that take place in the world during the Messianic era. Lesson 1. We talked about so many of them. Let's refresh your memory a little bit. There will be no more war, no crime, no poverty, no scarcity. There's not going to be disability. So even though nature will not change, there will be vast improvements. Physically speaking, we will be absolutely tremendously blessed. Now, what's that all about, right? Why is there this physical abundance that will take place in the Messianic era? Text number 11. Mitchell, please.
Physical blessings. The Messianic era is defined as a time in which sovereignty will revert to Israel and the Jewish people will return to the land of Israel. In those days, it will be extremely easy for people to make a living. A minimum of labor will produce tremendous benefits. This is the meaning of our sage's statement that in the future, the land of Israel will bring forth ready baked rolls and fine woolen garments. The great benefit of that era is that there will experience respite from the oppression that prevents us from doing good. There will be a widespread increase in wisdom, as it is stated. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of God. War and battle will cease, as is stated. Nation will not lift up sword against nation. The human lifespan will be lengthened as a result of the absence of stress and suffering. We do not long and hope for the Messianic era simply because we desire the abundance of produce and property, or because we wish to ride horses or drink wine to the accompaniment of music, as some confused people think. Rather, our prophets and pious yearned for that era because then the righteous will assemble, and good conduct and wisdom will prevail. It will be possible then to observe the entire Torah without worry or fear.
So the Rambam writes that, of course, these prophecies will come true, and we will have unbelievable physical blessings. However, the laws of nature will still apply, and we will still need to go to work, right? After all, we are human beings. There is a world that has to run. There's a world that has to function. There are jobs that are going to have to take place, and we will have to do them. However, the nature of our jobs is going to be radically different. Minimal efforts will yield great results. What do we mean we will only have minimal efforts? Now, today, certainly every one of us wishes we could dedicate more time to Torah study, more time to true introspective prayer. But we have a lot of responsibilities, we have a lot of obligations that get in the way, and we simply can't do it. When Mashiach comes, all of those obstacles will be removed. Why will we have all of those physical blessings? Why will we only have to be involved with work on a very minimal level, so that we then can dedicate ourselves to true study of Torah, to true prayer, to true introspection, and to developing our capabilities and our qualities and our character traits to the highest possible level. So Mashiach is the time where there simply will be no more excuses left. There will only be opportunities available for you to learn, to study, to grow and to pray. So it's enabling, the physical blessings will be enabling a distraction-free life to serve Hashem. Up until this point, very limited on the miracles. Can anyone here think of something that's supposed to take place in the Messianic era that appears to be miraculous? Any thoughts? You can unmute yourself. What do you know about the Messianic era that appears to be miraculous?
All the people that passed away will come back to life?
Absolutely, Brad. The resurrection of the dead. There is nothing more miraculous than the resurrection of the dead. This is why the greatest magic trick that any magician can do is saw somebody in half, right? You can saw somebody in half convincingly, you got it made, right? You're going to perform in Las Vegas. The resurrection of the dead is the greatest possible trick that a person can perform. Whatever happened to the whole laws of nature business? Now, what's interesting is that most of the sources that we've discussed in this class come from the Rambam. Why the Rambam? Because he actually codified a section in his Code of Jewish Law about what will take place in the Messianic era. No other rabbi has done that. Many rabbis have commented about the Messianic era, but no one has written a comprehensive overview of the Messianic era like the Rambam. Therefore, right, he is the ideal person to discuss the Messianic era. Yet surprisingly, in his laws of Mashiach, he does not make any mention of the resurrection of the dead. Why? Some have speculated that perhaps he did not believe in the resurrection of the dead. Could that be possible? Impossible. Absolutely not. Why? For two reasons. Number one, he does make reference to the resurrection of the dead in his Code of Law, just not in the section about Mashiach. He quotes it in the section about the laws of Teshuvah. And even more conclusively, he authored 13 principles of Jewish faith. Principle number 13 is the resurrection of the dead. So the Rambam states clearly, black and white, that during the Messianic era, there's going to be a resurrection of the dead. Now, there were people who were speculating that he doesn't believe in it. So in order to silence them once and for all, he wrote something that is called the Epistle of the Resurrection of the Dead. Now, I'm pretty sure that epistle is just a fancy way of saying an essay, right? An article. But it's always called the Epistle on the Resurrection of the Dead, where he mentions crystal clear, right, that the revival of the dead is one of the 13 principles of Jewish faith. And the Rambam says crystal clear, this is not a metaphor. This is meant to be taken absolutely in the most literal fashion. Now, in this epistle of the resurrection of the dead, he has some interesting comments to make about the Messianic era, and that is text number 12. Vivian, would you like to read text number 12? Really, page 266.
Yeah. We'll know then. It is important to realize that when I stated that certain prophecies are to be understood allegorically, this is not absolute. No prophetic communication informed me that they are allegorical, nor did I receive a tradition from the sages and prophets that these particular matters are parables. Let me explain what brought me to the allegorical approach. I strive to bring harmony between the Torah and human intellect, which is why I explain things in a natural way whenever possible. However, when it is self-evident that the connotation is miraculous indeed, and it is not possible to interpret otherwise, I say that it is a miracle. The bottom line is that regarding specific prophecies about the redemption that do not involve the fundamentals of our Jewish faith, it matters not whether one believes that they are literal or allegorical. We have to wait for their realization, may it occur speedily in our days, to discover whether these statements refer to actual miracles or simply allegories for natural changes.
So this is a fascinating insight into Rambam's thinking. Right? Rambam tells us that his general approach is, if there is no need to apply a teaching or a statement that appears to be miraculous in a literal way, then you apply it in an allegorical and metaphorical way, right? If that can be applied in that way. However, he fully acknowledges that this is just his approach to interpreting the scripture and to interpreting Tanakh. He prefers the non-literal interpretation that follows with the laws of nature when possible, when it makes sense. However, he fully admits that the Messianic era could be marvelously miraculous. It could be that every backyard will have a friendship circle cafe tree, right? There will be caramel macchiatos growing. There will be cookie crunkle, a chocolate crunkle, whatever those cookies are, those raspberry drop cookies, cinnamon, all this stuff is going to grow on trees in the backyard. It could be all these luxuries will be there. Children will play with lions. It's very possible. We'll have to wait and see. Part of this perhaps depends on the nature and the style of the Messianic era. We discussed in a previous lesson, if the Jewish people are worthy and we merit it, the third temple will descend from heaven on a cloud. That means the entire Messianic era, it will be miraculous from start to finish. So perhaps we will be blessed with caramel macchiatos growing on trees in our backyard. However, if we are unworthy, in other words, we're not worthy of the miraculous style, it's rather a process of our labor over thousands of years, then the Messianic era will unfold according to the laws of nature and will not be miraculous. However, the Rebbe makes an interesting insight based on the Rambam. We still have the resurrection of the dead to deal with. According to the approach that the Messianic era may unfold in a way that does not change the laws of nature, it might be strange if all of a sudden there's a major resurrection of the dead, right? Might be a little bit unusual. I'm sure you heard about the tailor who was very, very excited to learn about the resurrection of the dead. He says, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be a multimillionaire. I'm going to have customers out the door around the block because all these people are going to be resurrected. I'm going to be so busy, it's going to be great. So one of his friends says to him, I don't know why you think you're going to be so busy. I know that there's going to be a lot of potential new customers because people have been resurrected. But don't you realize that a lot of tailors are also going to be resurrected? So the guy says, yeah, but only I know all the latest fashions. Right? I apologize for telling that joke on camera and being recorded, but the Messianic era is pretty miraculous. So it will look a little strange if the world is running according to the laws of nature, and then all of a sudden, dead people start walking the earth. So the Rebbe posits, or the Rebbe suggests, based on the Rambam's writing, that there's going to be two periods in the Messianic era according to the laws of nature. The first period, the first section will function according to the laws of nature, including the Beis Hamikdash, including the Jews returning to the land of Israel. That will then be followed by a miraculous period with the resurrection of the dead. And then we will ultimately see some of those miracles taking place and the world operating not just according to the laws of nature. So the Rebbe suggests that there could be two periods within the Messianic era. Now, a final question. What is the purpose of the resurrection of the dead? Right? Besides it being pretty cool, what is the purpose of the resurrection of the dead? So very simple. It is a reward for the body and soul. We get a reward for the mitzvahs that we do. We did the mitzvahs while we were in a body. Therefore, we need to get a reward for those mitzvahs while we're in a body. So therefore, when Mashiach comes, our bodies will be resurrected, so we can actually experience the reward with our bodies for the mitzvahs that we did with our bodies. On a deeper level, in the Messianic era, we're going to experience not just the reward for the mitzvahs, but the result of the mitzvahs. As we have mentioned previously in an earlier class, the Messianic era is not a reward for the mitzvahs that we do, it's the result of the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs actually create a dwelling place for God on earth. They fulfill the purpose of creation. We are going to experience that home for God, which we created, which cannot be experienced in Gan Eden. The essence of God can only be experienced on earth. And finally, it makes a very powerful theological statement, which is Judaism does not believe in asceticism. Judaism does not believe with removing yourself from the physical world. Judaism does not value the soul over the body. Judaism values transforming the physical, recognizing and revealing the godly spark and the divine purpose within the physical world. Therefore, the ultimate purpose of creation is not a godly, heavenly world of souls without bodies. Rather, it's the ultimate revelation and transformation of the physical world, bodies and souls, the physical world reflecting its creator. The Messianic era is all about that physical transformation, which we're going to experience. Therefore, there has to be a resurrection of the dead. Bringing about the Messianic era, and especially this element, the transformation of the physical, is something that we can do today. It's in our hands. We are empowered to do so. When we live a life that's full of Torah and mitzvahs, when we live a life that's full of purpose, of meaning, of spirituality, when the physical and the spiritual within our life is in sync and functioning as one, when our bodies are able to reveal and to express and be a conduit for our soul, that is when Mashiach is going to come. So we have to remember it is in our hands to make it happen, because the Messianic era is literally the result of our actions. Text number 14. Irv, could you please read text number 14 on page 270?
Act 1. You should view yourself at all times as equally balanced with merits and faults, and view the world similarly, equally balanced with merits and faults. Therefore, if you perform one mitzvah, you tip the balance, your own and that of all humankind, and effect personal and global deliverance and salvation.
The Rambam says, how should a person view life? That the world is equally balanced. We have the ability, one mitzvah that we can do can tip the whole scale and can bring about the Messianic era. That is the power of a single mitzvah. That is the power of every single moment and every opportunity. We should take one mitzvah, do it today, and let's hope that that is going to be the mitzvah that is going to tip the scales and is going to bring about the coming of Mashiach.
Lesson 6. And then. 1. In his halachic code, Maimonides states that we should not presume that the world's nature will change in the Messianic era. Prophecies implying otherwise are to be understood as allegories. That said, this era will be marked by huge changes. 2. One radical change, a complete end to anti-Semitism and total independence for the Jewish people. 3. Mashiach will rebuild the Jerusalem temple to the applause of all nations, who will recognize the benefit that God's sacred home offers the entire world. 4. Non-Jews will also experience the redemption. The Jewish redemption is a universal concept. 5. Building the temple will cause the global ingathering of all Jews, who will recognize its great sanctity and desire a share in its environs. 6. The return of the 10 lost tribes is a matter of Talmudic dispute. Some attribute the uncertainty to the tribes' assumed assimilation. Regardless, it is undisputed that all 12 tribes will be represented in the land of Israel. 7. The possibility of observing all of the Torah's laws will return, due to the existence of the Jewish monarch and temple, and the reality of Jews living securely on their land. 8. The Sanhedrin, forced to disband centuries ago, will return. One resulting change will be that the Jewish calendar will revert to a system of observation. 9. The Jewish prophets mention a great war associated with the Messianic era, but the prophecies are difficult to interpret with any certainty. Rabbi Shimon demonstrates by applying Psalms 2 to this war that the threat and tumult will amount to nothing. 10. The cessation of war, crime, poverty, scarcity, and disability will enable us to fully fulfill the purpose for which God created us without pain or worry. 11. In his Epistle on Resurrection, Maimonides clarified that nature-altering miracles may indeed occur in the Messianic era. We are aware of one, the resurrection of the dead, but others are possible as well. 12. The resurrection is important because it will enable all who participated in making this world into a home for God to share in the magnificent outcome. It will also demonstrate the complete spiritual transformation of the body and, by extension, the entire physical world.
To continue learning online about this topic, myjli.com/canhappen. The 3 courses that we're going to have next year, course number 1, October 21, Outsmarting Anti-Semitism. It's hard to outrun it. It's time to outsmart it. Against the backdrop of a recent uptick in anti-Semitism and the increased anxiety it has brought to the Jewish community, this course sets out to beat this age-old cancer with purpose, positivity, and pride. Marshaling historical analysis, Talmudic sources, Jewish mysticism, and contemporary expert analysis, the 4 lessons of this course provide insight, perspective, practical direction, and personal reassurance to motivate and inspire proud, fearless Jewish life. Now, note, this is a 4-part course rather than a 6-part course. JLI is experimenting to see if a 4-part course will bring more or less people. It's an experiment. The next course is February 2022, Jewish meditation, mindfulness, spirituality. This course will explore the world of authentic Torah and Hasidus-based meditation and spirituality in a down-to-earth and accessible way. Capitalizing on the popularity of meditation and mindfulness, this course will expose students to the unique Jewish approach to meditation, give them practical techniques to incorporate these teachings in their lives, and communicate Hasidic teachings in an entirely new light. In May 2022, Beyond Right, the values that shape Judaism's civil code. This course, approved for legal credits, combined the study of Jewish values with the exploration of practical and relevant halachic questions. In this course, we discuss fundamental Jewish values as Lifnim Mishuras Adin, which means going beyond the letter of the law, Arvus, which means the responsibility that we have for each other, Teshuvah, the concept of return and repentance in civil law, and demonstrate how these values guide and shape Jewish civil law. The goal of this course is to teach students the true meaning of Jewish values and what makes Jewish civil law uniquely Jewish. So these are the 3 courses that you have to look forward to in the upcoming year. And the plan is that they should be in person, right? That is ultimately the plan, that we should actually be in person. Thank you so much for joining us for the past 6 weeks for the course This Can Happen. I hope that it really brought home the importance and the prominence that the concept of Mashiach and the Messianic era places within Judaism. And I hope that it causes within you a sense of urgency that the world is not the way it's meant to be, and we need to do everything in our power to make the world the place that it's destined to be, to fulfill the purpose of creation and bringing about the Messianic era. Thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to studying with you in the future.